Let's talk today about speaking the truth. And at the end of the homily, I'm going to try to do that in relation to scandals in the church. And my hope is that in the future, we can apply this idea of speaking the truth to racism, transgenderism, and a host of other issues where there's debate. We've talked about self-censorship a few times now. I've mentioned I have this fear. I can't say maybe everything because I think some of you might not be able to handle it. And so I wonder today, will I speak the truth but still be misunderstood? Will some of you get angry, leave, never come back? I've talked to a bunch of you. I know you have hesitations too about speaking the truth. You know, there's certain things that we're not supposed to say, right? And people can get mad at us. People are getting more aggressive online. We might lose friendships over this. Jesus' words in the gospel are very encouraging. He wants us to speak the truth. He actually demands us to speak the truth. And he gives us 4 reasons why we shouldn't be afraid. First, he says, "What I say to you in the dark, tell in the light. And what you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops." So the context of these words of Jesus are, he's about to send the 12 apostles out on a mission. They're going to have some fears, but they have to speak the truth. And what he says right here is that everything they've been taught by him in private, they have to share. So there's a quote from Bishop Daniel Mueggenborg of Seattle. He says, "The gospel is meant to be the public property of all people and not the personal possession of only a few." They've received so many insights from Jesus, this personal love, this formation when they were with him. They have to share it with everyone else. And in the same way, all of us have received God himself. We've received Jesus. And you can't just keep him. You have to share. And when Jesus says to proclaim from the housetops, if you proclaim from the housetops, that means it's going to fall on open ears and deaf ears. And we can't control it. We just have to accept it. But if we don't proclaim, who's going to proclaim Jesus? No one else will. And if we don't proclaim, one thing's for sure, no one will ever believe in him because they never had the chance. Number 2, second reason not to be afraid, Jesus says, "Do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell." What does it mean to kill the soul? The soul is immortal, so to kill the soul doesn't mean that it's going to cease to exist. It's going to stop existing. What does it mean to kill the soul? To kill the soul means it turns to evil. So whenever the soul, if we choose what is morally good, we come alive, right? But if we choose what is morally evil, what is wrong, we die. Jesus says to not fear those who kill the body. Anyone can kill the body. But he says there's only one person who can kill the soul ultimately. Who is it? Who can kill your soul? You. Only you can kill your soul by turning it to evil. So he's telling the 12 apostles, if you don't fulfill your mission, if you do not speak the truth that needs to be said, you will lose your soul. You will lose your very self. You know that expression, to sell your soul? We don't use it a lot very, very often. To sell your soul means to do what is bad, but in exchange for a benefit. And it usually means to get someone's acceptance, to be liked, to go along with the crowd. So whenever we refuse to speak a truth that must be said, at least in a partial way, we're selling our souls. Think about this truth. Actions form habits, and habits form character. Actions lead to habits. Habits lead to character. So let's do this with a few examples. Let's say I tell one lie. That's a wrong action. But when I do it repeatedly, I build up the habit of lying. And I have what's called the vice of lying, virtues and vices. A vice is an immoral habit. If I do it enough, it becomes part of who I am. I become a liar. It's part of my identity now, my character. I'm a liar. If I tell the truth once, good. If I keep on doing it, I build up the virtue of honesty. And then if I do it enough, I become an honest person. And this idea of actions to habits to character, it works with every moral choice we make. So let's take courage. If I just speak the truth once, good. If I keep on doing, I build up the virtue of courage, and then eventually I'm a courageous person. But if I hold back because I'm afraid, That's a cowardly act. Do it enough, I have the vice of cowardice. And then if I do it enough, I am now a coward. Jordan Peterson, the Canadian psychologist, he talks a lot about speak the truth, speak the truth. And this is resonating worldwide. And in response to the question, what is the best way to protect ourselves from doing horrific things as happened in communist countries where people went along with a crowd, he says this: the way you fight them is that you don't lie about anything, ever. The entire Soviet Union was pervaded by lies. 1/3 of the people were government informers. You could never say anything that you believe to be true. And it doesn't start by people directly lying. It starts by people muffling themselves because there are certain things you can no longer say. You demolish your character through sins of omission and you get weak. And as soon as you're weak, people can manipulate you like mad, can manipulate you like mad. So he says, as a psychologist, that when we're telling the truth or lying, we can actually feel it physiologically. He says you feel it in your solar plexus. When we lie, we feel ourselves coming apart, disintegrating. But when we tell the truth, we feel ourselves coming together, being strengthened. Third reason not to be afraid, Jesus says, are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. And even the hairs of your head are all counted. So do not be afraid. You are of more value than many sparrows. So the sparrow was the cheapest meat you could buy in a marketplace at that time, and a penny was 1/16 of your daily wage. So Jesus is saying, if God is aware and takes care of such insignificant things, how much more will he take care of us who are trying to speak the truth, do his will? So I've got all these worries about what other people think. You've got these worries, and all these worries fail to take into account God's in control. He always brings good out of difficulty. And St. Paul tells us, all things work for good for those who love God. And so number 3, very encouraging. Fourth reason is very challenging. Jesus says, everyone, therefore, who acknowledges me before others, I also will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before others, I also will deny before my Father in heaven. Jesus says in St. John's Gospel that he is the truth. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Whenever we acknowledge truth, we acknowledge Jesus. Whenever we deny a truth that must be said, then we deny Jesus. Jesus says he's going to deny us if we deny him. Why? Because he's not going to force us to be with him. If we refuse him, he will accept our free choice. And I have always found this very motivating. Yes, part of me is afraid of people's reactions, but a part of me should be even more afraid of Jesus' reaction, because I don't want to be separated from him for all eternity. So let's apply this idea of telling the truth, speaking the truth. Let's apply it to scandals in the church. And I chose this issue because we first have to critique our own sins before we critique the sins of the world. We have to clean up our own mess before we help other people clean up theirs. But here, this is what I want to prepare you for. If we speak the truth today in relation to problems in the Catholic Church, that's very palatable. Most people consider that, oh, that is acceptable. If we apply the truth today to this issue, what I want to ask you is, will you be able to apply the same standard of speaking the truth to every other issue, especially those issues that are politically incorrect? Racism, transgenderism. Because we know there are certain things you're not supposed to say. Political correctness says you can't ask certain questions, and that's not right. So we have to apply speaking the truth to every issue equally, and it might even challenge our own world view. One problem in the church is that there's an instinctual but harmful reaction among many bishops, priests, and lay Catholics that whenever there's a scandal, we downplay it. We want to ignore it. Now, if we do that, it kills our credibility, because people think, wait, you're willing to criticize the sins of the world, but you're not willing to criticize your own. no credibility. Second thing is it kills our soul. Because if we in the hierarchy are afraid of critiquing our own sins, we lose moral strength, and we lose the strength to criticize other sins. And then third, if we lie, we become a shell. We're nothing. So here are some examples of speaking the truth. The very trustworthy Catholic reporter John Allen, he wrote that on May 1st this year, 6 Vatican employees, including 3 clerics, and a cleric is a deacon, priest, or a bishop. I don't know what rank they were, but including 3 clerics. These 6 people were fired because they were all suspects in a land deal in London, England, in which the Vatican Secretariat of State used $225 million from Peter's Pence collection to buy a former Herod's warehouse. And then the deal went bad. And this is what John Allen says. The reasons for the firings need to be explained. If parish priests around the world are supposed to stand in front of their congregations and appeal for support for Peter's Pence this year on October 4th, they too are owed an explanation of what happened. Most Catholics believed Peter's Pence was designed to support papal charities, and they may be less inclined to give if they think their money will instead end up in speculative land deals. Another example, Father Raymond de Souza, Canadian priest, he wrote a factual column with a very provocative title. The title is, "We used to believe bishops told the truth. What happened?" And one of the examples he gives is of Cardinal Wuerl, formerly in Washington, D.C. Cardinal Wuerl said in 2018 that he had no knowledge of Cardinal McCarrick ever being accused of sexual abuse, and he's the most notorious sexual abuser among the clergy ever in the United States. So Cardinal Wuerl said he had no idea, but 14 years ago, 14 years before that, he had already received formal complaints that Cardinal McCarrick was abusing people, and he himself sent these abuse complaints to the Apostolic Nuncio. The Apostolic Nuncio is the Pope's representative to the United States. So you said you didn't know anything, but you clearly did. And so he explained that discrepancy as a lapse in memory, but no one believed him, and no one should believe him. We should not be afraid of calling cover-ups and calling people to account. It's the right thing to ask for answers online, sign petitions, talk about it. Because once it's more public, then there's a healthy pressure to improve. Healing comes when we acknowledge the truth, and when we atone for our sins, we regain our soul. When it comes, for example, to the truth regarding the church's involvement in Canadian residential schools, we need to acknowledge a tremendous amount of evil was committed by priests, brothers, and sisters. Not only was there physical and sexual abuse, but the Truth and Reconciliation Commission called residential schools a central element in cultural genocide, doing their part to wipe out people's institutions, language, culture, and religion. Admitting the truth, Jesus says, will set us free. As Catholics, none of this should shake our faith in Jesus or in the church. There have always been Judases in the church who will betray Jesus, but our faith isn't in them. Our faith is in Jesus. And the Catholic Church is still the church that Jesus founded, and it is still his family. If you ever have a chance to watch the documentary, it's called In the Spirit of Reconciliation. It's about the church and survivors of residential schools. And an amazing, miraculous thing is some of these survivors still have faith in Jesus and in the church. And final point, to admit these sins is not to say that everyone working in the Vatican is mishandling money, or that every bishop is lying, or that every missionary who was at a residential school was evil. It's only to acknowledge we have to take the log out of our own eye before we help take the splinter out of our neighbor's eye. So today we're admitting we have a communal fear of speaking the truth, but we're also praising the virtue of speaking the truth. And because of that, we're already morally stronger. We're already spiritually stronger. And once again, Jesus gives us 4 reasons not to be afraid. 1, we cannot keep Jesus and the truth to ourselves. He must be shared. 2, if we don't speak the truth, we will lose our soul. 3, God will bring good out of evil when we challenge what is politically correct. 4, if we deny Jesus, he will deny us. And because of these 4 reasons, we're overcoming our fear of speaking the truth.